The Middle East isn't just redrawing borders, it's redefining what counts as a target. The new front line doesn't run through trenches. It runs through servers, chips, and digital identity. And when the infrastructure that keeps banks, hospitals, and governments running enters the calculus, the conflict changes scale. This isn't about who has more missiles. It's about who can switch the world off without firing a shot. On March 11, 2026, the Tasnim news agency, affiliated with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, published a list. Not a list of military bases, not a list of diplomatic targets, a list of offices and data centers belonging to Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Oracle, IBM, Palantir, and Amazon, spread across Israel and the Gulf states. And next to each address, one phrase: legitimate targets. When digital infrastructure enters the threat calculus of an armed conflict, the game changes. Because it's no longer just about who has the missiles, it's about who controls the data, the chips, and the computing power that moves the world. Let's set the moment. On February 28th, the US and Israel launched coordinated strikes against Iran, Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion. A dual offensive targeting nuclear sites, military installations, and Iranian leadership. The response was immediate and on multiple fronts: missiles into the Gulf, drones over Dubai, closure of the Strait of Hormuz. But Iran also opened a third front, less visible and possibly more lasting. Within 24 hours of the strikes, more than 60 pro-Iranian hacktivist groups were activated. That's data from Palo Alto Unit 42, published March 2026. Internet connectivity inside Iran itself dropped to between 1 and 4%. But the external operatives, the cells outside Iranian territory, began acting with tactical autonomy. What does that mean? It means Iran's cyber warfare capability doesn't depend on Tehran being online. It has branches that function even when the command center is degraded. Before we go further, I need to be precise here, because cloud risk became jargon, and jargon obscures what's actually at stake. Cloud, in practice, means physical data centers, buildings, servers, cables, power. It means identity networks that control who accesses what across companies, governments, and banks. It means managed services running hospitals, logistics, aviation, payments, and supply chains. When Iran struck Amazon Web Services data centers in the UAE and Bahrain, this is confirmed, not an allegation, the result wasn't just a tech company going offline. It was banking services, payments, and enterprise operations down across the entire region. The New Republic reported this on March 11th. So when we talk about cloud risk, we're talking about three distinct types of threat: physical attack, a bombing or drone strike against a data center, immediate damage, slow recovery; cyber attack, intrusion, sabotage, ransomware, DDoS, can be invisible for days, and the real damage only shows up later; indirect pressure, sanctions, blockades, insurance costs, investment impact. No missile involved, but it freezes projects, locks up capital, and pushes companies out of the region. All three are active. Right now, the Iranian list isn't random. There's a clear strategic logic behind it. Google and Microsoft are infrastructure, not in a metaphorical sense, in the literal sense. They are the identity, authentication, and managed service platforms that governments, armed forces, and critical enterprises rely on daily. Taking down or degrading a Microsoft server in the Gulf can disrupt military operations, healthcare systems, and financial networks at the same time. NVIDIA is different, and maybe even more strategic. Tasnim specifically named NVIDIA's R&D campus in Haifa, Israel. Why? Because NVIDIA doesn't just sell chips. It sells computational capacity for artificial intelligence. And that capacity has become a military strategic advantage. Air defense systems, intelligence analysis, target recognition. All of it depends on computing power. Controlling or destroying that node means attacking the adversary's technological edge. And there's a detail the New Republic laid out well. NVIDIA, Oracle, and Cisco are all involved in the Stargate project, a 10-square-mile AI campus that OpenAI is building in the UAE. Microsoft plans to invest $15 billion in the Emirates over the next 3 years. If Iran escalates attacks against that infrastructure, all of those plans go on hold. And that's exactly the point. The impacts don't happen all at once. They propagate in layers, and each layer feeds the next. Layer 1, operational, the most immediate. Services go down. Systems degrade. Third parties get caught in the blast radius. The Iranian group Seedworm, subordinate to Iran's Ministry of Intelligence, according to Say, was already inside American networks before February 28th. Symantec identified intrusions in a U.S. bank, an airport, a software company with ties to defense and aerospace, and NGOs in the United States and Canada. Dwell time, how long an attacker stays inside a system without being detected, reached 5 years in previous Iranian campaigns, according to CISA's own data. This isn't speculation, it's confirmed. On March 13th, pro-Iranian hackers claimed an attack on American medical device company Stryker. Security cameras across the Middle East were compromised to improve the accuracy of Iranian missiles. Reported by the AP and the Economic Times. Layer 2, economic. The second impact doesn't require any physical damage to happen. Cyber insurance premiums rise when there's an active war. Companies with data centers in the region start reassessing their presence. Investors hesitate. The AI project in the UAE, 10 square miles of computational infrastructure, becomes an open question, not a certainty. Every confirmed incident raises the cost of being in the region. And cost is pressure, even without a single missile hitting a server. Layer 3. Political and strategic. The slowest and the most lasting. When American corporate infrastructure is designated as a target by a foreign power, that creates domestic pressure in the U.S. for retaliation. The big tech companies have close relationships with the Trump administration. NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft, they all hold federal contracts and have direct influence over industrial policy. This isn't abstract. It's a pressure that pushes toward new coalitions, new export controls, and possibly toward escalation that no side fully planned for. 3 scenarios. Ranked, no certainties. Scenario 1, signaling and deterrence. Probability, high. The Tasnim target list is, for now, rhetoric backed by limited demonstrations. Iran has already struck AWS data centers, already compromised cameras, is already inside American networks, but it hasn't escalated to large-scale destruction of digital infrastructure. Why? Because Palo Alto Unit 42 identified something important. With Iran's domestic connectivity down to 1 to 4%, the ability to coordinate sophisticated cyber operations from inside the country is severely reduced. The external cells have tactical autonomy, but without cohesive central command, escalation stays contained. This calibrated deterrence scenario is the most likely in the short term. Scenario 2, calibrated cyber operations and proxy expansion. Probability, medium-high. As the conflict drags on and Iran loses conventional military capability, the pressure migrates to cyberspace. More attacks on third-party vendors, not the big techs directly, but the smaller companies that serve them. supply chain attacks, intrusions into healthcare, energy and logistics sectors, hacktivist groups aligned with Iran, already 60-plus groups activated within hours, continue operating even without central coordination. That makes the damage unpredictable and difficult to attribute with precision. Scenario 3. Digital infrastructure as an explicit battlefield. Probability: low, but not ignorable. If the conflict extends for weeks, and if Iranian connectivity is partially restored, the APT groups, advanced persistent threats, linked to the IRGC, could shift from espionage mode to destruction mode. Attacks on critical American infrastructure, energy, water, financial systems. Cloud SEK identified more than 40,000 American ICS devices exposed on the Internet. That's attack surface, not theoretical potential. This scenario is costly for Iran because it triggers direct American retaliation. But when command and control is fragmented, miscalculation becomes easier. If you want to track this dimension of the conflict, the signal is in specific places. Cybersecurity agencies. Alerts from CISA, the British NCSC, and reports from Palo Alto Unit 42 and Symantec are the most reliable thermometers. When they issue alerts in sequence, it's because they're seeing movement, attack patterns. DDoS is noise. Silent intrusion into supply chains is the real signal of escalation. Pay attention to the difference. Chip export controls. If the U.S. government tightens restrictions on NVIDIA GPU exports to countries in the region, including allies with ambiguous relationships, that's a sign the conflict has reached the industrial layer. Red line statements. When the language shifts from threat to red line and proportional retaliation, the room for accident shrinks, and the risk goes up. Cyber insurance and aviation markets. These are the most honest sensors. When the cost of operating in the region climbs fast, it's because the people who know the most are pricing in what isn't being said publicly. On March 11th, Iran didn't launch a missile at Google. It published a list. But that list has already produced real effects. Billion-dollar projects in doubt, data centers struck, networks compromised, and a question the global tech sector now has to answer. How much of the AI investment in the Middle East survives an infrastructure war? Digital infrastructure stopped being the backdrop of this conflict. It became part of the balance of power. And the question that remains, if Iran, with 1% domestic connectivity and fragmented command, can already do this, what happens when coordination is restored? Drop in the comments which of the three scenarios you think is most likely. And if you want the next video on how companies and governments are reorganizing their security posture in response to this, say the word.